you've talked about it, which is really interesting framing, is escaping bad positions is one of the best ways, if not the best way, to demonstrate dominance psychologically over your opponent. That anything they throw at you, like their weapons, are useless against you.
Yes. There's a little bit of Lex Fridman kicking through on this
I
question. Your
apologize.
obsession with dominance is it's skewing
It's
your
a
point of
therapy
view.
session. It's a therapy session. I'm coming from a wrestling perspective. I think it's not just Lex Friedman. I think it's Dan Gable. I think it's dominant. The Gary Tonin ethic is just goes against everything wrestling is about. You never put yourself
Yes.
in a bad position. And the fact it's philosophically, I don't know what to do with it. It's a total reframing of showing dominance by escaping any bad position.
Yeah. Let's talk about the idea of what is the value of escapes? Why do I put this in as the first skill that every jiu-jitsu student must master? Believe it or not, when I talked about how it pertains to dominance, that's its smallest value. Its greatest value has nothing to do with dominance. It has to do with confidence. You can train someone and teach them technique until you're blue in the face. But at some point, the athlete in question has to go out there on the stage and pull the trigger when the time is right. What's going to give you that ability to go from the physical skills that you've learned to execution under pressure is confidence. I always talk about skill development, and yes, skill development is the absolute bedrock of my training programs. But you can't finish at that level. There has to be something more than that. And you have to go from the physical element of skill into the psychological element of confidence. I can teach you an armbar all day. You can get to a point where you can flawlessly execute armbars in drilling and even in a certain level of competition. But if you believe that in attempting an armbar on a dangerous opponent with good guard passing skills, say the armbar has been performed from guard position, that if the armbar fails and your opponent uses that failure to set up a strong pass and get into a side pin, possibly into the mount, and you don't have the ability to get out of that side pin or mount, you won't pull the trigger on the armbar. And so even though you had all the requisite physical skills to perform the technique, when push came to shove and the critical moment came, you backed down. You didn't pull the trigger. Building that confidence is the key to championship performance. And the single best way to do it is to take away the innate fear that we all have of bad outcomes that makes us naturally risk averse. When you don't believe you can be pinned, when you don't believe your guard can be passed, you'll take risks because there's no downside to your actions. An unpinnable person and an unpassable person doesn't have much to fear in a jiu-jitsu match. You can come out and fire with all guns blazing because you know at the end of the day, no one's going to hold you down, no one's going to pass your guard. That's your first two goals in jiu-jitsu. They're the most boring goals. They're not exciting to learn. No one wants to come in their first and be told, okay, you're going to practice escapes for the next year of your life. Okay, it's like, oh, are you kidding me? But that's what you got to have. That's your first skill. And that's what I push upon all of my students. You'll see almost all of them are very, very strong in escape skills. They know that if things go wrong, they can always get out. They can always live to fight another day. And that is what gives them the ability to attack without fear.
I think that it's so profound and so rare. It's so rare to hear this. I think it's because it's the most painful thing to do.
Always ask yourself, when you enter a jiu-jitsu match, you already know ahead of time if you're going to lose, how you're going to lose. Okay, there's only a certain number of realistic submissions that work in the sport of jiu-jitsu. The number is very small. So ahead of time, you already know the most likely methods of submission loss in jiu-jitsu are going to be things like heel hook, armbar, rear naked strangle, guillotine, etc., etc. Just work backwards from that knowledge. So start off learning how to defend all of those things. You know what the major losing positions are in jiu-jitsu. Someone gets mounted on you, rear mount, side control, knee on belly. Those are positions you can only lose from. So work backwards from there, getting out of those positions. And that's how I always start. I always say with my students, I teach beginners from the ground up, and I teach experts backwards. What does that mean? When a young student comes to me with no skills, they learn from the ground up. They start on their backs defending pins. Then they start on their backs working from half guard bottom, then on their backs working from variations of guard. They don't even get to see top position until they're strong off their backs. Then they go onto their knees and they start passing, start standing and passing, and then they work their pins and transitions. And then ultimately they stand up to their feet and they work standing position on their feet. So they work from ground back on the floor to ground, knees on the floor, ground standing, and then both athletes standing. It's a gradual progression over time where they work from the bottom to the top. With regards experts, I teach them end game first. They must become very, very strong in what finishes the match, which is submission holds.